Hello, my name is Mariah Crawford, and today I will be discussing a history of special education as well as some recommended resources to stay up to date on special education laws. So, before the 1700s, people with disabilities were seen as inferior and they were deprived of basic human rights and subjected to unfair treatment. After the 1700s, the history of special education can be broken into essentially three parts. There was the early reform, regression, and then contemporary reform eras. The early reform era was between 1800 and the 1860s, and this was a time of education and enlightenment where philosophers and scientists began to shed a light on people with disabilities for the first time. It wasn't until the mid-18th century that places in Europe began to educate people with disabilities such as blindness and deafness. However, despite these advancements, the way that people with disabilities were treated were still a reflection of societal norms and attitudes. This leads to the regression era, which was between 1860 and 1950s. And at the beginning of this era is when Charles Darwin's work on the animal world was applied to human society with negative repercussions on people with disabilities. Eugenic and intelligence tests were also heightened during this era, which segregated people with disabilities even more from society. This hindered the forward progression of special education. And then following World War II, society's perceptions changed once again and laws began to be passed in favor of people with disabilities. This would begin the contemporary reform era, which was 1950s to present day. In the 70s, society had a more humanistic perspective, which led to the Education for All Handicapped Children Act being passed in 1975, also known as IDEA. Although free and appropriate public education was the motive behind this law still lacked clarity and was interpreted differently throughout the country. So one court case that involved the interpretation of IDEA was Hendrick Hudson District Board of Education versus Raleigh in 1982. Amy Raleigh was a student with a hearing impairment, and her parents sought a sign language interpreter so that she could participate in mainstream classrooms. The court ruled in favor of the school district and said that Amy was receiving an appropriate education that met her IEP needs and did not need an interpreter. This case helped to define what constitutes a free, appropriate public education, and it clarified that this does not mean providing the best possible education or all requested services, but instead offering an IEP that is tailored to meet the needs of each student. Another case that further clarified the free, appropriate public education standard was Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District in 2017. Andrew was a boy with autism whose parents wanted him to have a special education plan to help him. The court decided that Andrew's school did not do enough to help him and stated that schools should have a special education plan, just like an IEP that is designed for the needs of each student with a disability. The case was important because it reminded everyone that all kids, whether they have a disability or not, should get a chance to learn and succeed at school. So now here are 3 recommended resources to stay up to date with special education laws. So in my state, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website provides information and resources on special education. It offers updates on policies, regulations, and developments related to special education. The website also includes links to relevant laws, documents, and training opportunities for educators and parents. Another resource is the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, which is a national organization that focuses on protecting the legal and civil rights of students with disabilities. They provide resources, webinars, and updates on special education laws and legal trends. Their website offers information on important court cases and policy changes related to special education. Lastly, Rights Law is a website that provides information on special education laws, advocacy, and resources. It has articles, newsletters, webinars, and a collection of legal materials. This site is known for its guidance and analysis of court cases that impact special education. So this concludes my video, and I hope that you were able to learn something new about the history of special education as well as the laws. Thank you for listening.